this concept of lining the racket up to the ball and to the target and swinging straight through is so embedded in our minds, it's really difficult to grasp how deep it is. But to give you an example, if you ask a beginner how to serve or to serve something, they'll usually stand at the baseline, and instead of standing sideways like a more skilled player will, they'll pivot straight to the target, right? And they'll put a waiter's grip on the racket so that this racket is already square up and facing to the ball before they begin their swing, and then they'll toss it up and then they'll push the swing like this. It can get it over, and you get a little better at it, you can get it over a little bit fast, but it's never the proper thing to do. Similarly, we have an underlying deep belief that in this stroking action, at some point, this racket should get lined up squarely behind the ball into the target and be pushed through. And yeah, there's a follow through, but there's a space here where we envision or think in our minds that we got to get this racket over here and then push through. And this is the ruin of many a shot. In the Federer topspin forehand paradigm, and you can see this in the other great players, Djokovic and Nadal as well, the racket is never lined up behind the ball except for the very last moment where the racket is squaring and coming into contact, but this racket actually continues in this arcing motion. There's never a point where the racket is simply literally going straight through to the target.
Before we move on to looking at the 4-0 player, let's take one last look at the sweeping arc of Federer's swing versus the ball flight. Here we're seeing Federer's swing the moment after contact. The ball is already heading towards the target and his racket continues to rotate around. Here a few frames later we see Federer's racket continuing this arcing swing to the left and up while the ball is traveling linearly towards the target again. In the follow-through action of Federer's swing, we see the same dynamic with the rotation of the racket, and we still capture the ball in these frames heading out towards the direction of the opponent.
So you can have a better idea of how important understanding this swing path versus the ball flight line is. We're going to look at a 4-0 player that I work with and do the same thing for his swing that we did for Federer. In other words, I filmed this in slow motion at 300 frames per second from the rear, and I'm going to put a red dot at the end of his racket as he goes through this swing path. So here's what it looks like. After taking a look at this 4-0 player's swing path, we're going to move on to comparing this 4-0 player's swing path with Roger Federer's. And you can take away two major differences. One is Federer begins his swing phase with a racket position much lower than the 4-0 player, who has what we call a shallow approach to his topspin shot. And secondly, note how Federer's racket swing path is much more of an upward arcing motion, while the 4-0 player's swing is more of a sweeping, hooking action around the ball. Both these things, Federer starting his swing path from a much lower position and his more vertical, upward arcing action, will make a huge difference at contact, particularly in generating more topspin for Federer than this 4-0 player.